Welcome to this week's Two Men in the Middle. This is where two men in the middle of the country get together and talk about politics, current events, and other fun and pressing issues. I'm Craig Huey.
I'm Brandon Kinnig.
And I'm Jason Peterson.
So the last couple times we've done this as a threesome. So I guess I have to change up my intro to say we're no longer two men in the middle. We're multiple men in the middle. That was my opening joke. I can see by YouTube's reaction. I'm going to have to do better than that tonight. Okay. So you guys are supposed to be in the mood to get right down to it. So we're going to start tonight with the ongoing effort by the Trump campaign to, I guess, overturn, nullify, or just generally confuse the hell out of everybody about what happened in the presidential election. And as we were warming up, we talked about when this first kind of settled that Biden was the president-elect, Trump supporters came out and Trump surrogates basically came out and said, he did get more votes than anybody expected. He's just going to need some time to process through this. Give him a couple weeks. He'll sort out his feelings and his emotions over what he feels about this, and we'll go on our way. That was one kind of introduction to maybe a timeline to how this was going to work. Then it was, hey, there's 74 million people that voted for him. They deserve to make sure that the election was on the up and up, that any of these fraud claims get adjudicated. And we owe this to the country in order for 74 million Americans to feel good about the election. And I guess at some base level, that makes sense. I could go along with that. But Jason, it feels like we left those two issues behind us maybe last week. And we're in some sort of uncharted territory right now with this. My question to you guys to kind of start off is what do you feel the end game is right now for Trump? What possibly could he be hanging on to with what he's doing right now that's going to set him up in the future to what he's going to do next when he leaves the White House?
Well, I think first I at least should acknowledge that I was wrong a couple of weeks ago when we asked what does it take for senators and others to stand up shoulder to shoulder and say, okay, this election has been decided, we're moving on. And one of them was getting through these court cases. That's clearly happened. And one of them was some official acknowledging it. Well, we've got that with even Barr now this week. And neither one of those things apparently have given enough cover for Trump leadership supporters to stand up and say, this is done. We need to move on. We need to work on legislation. We need to work on what we do next with COVID and what we face with the leadership changing in 2021. So what's left now? To me, it seems like Trump wants to keep raising money, energize the base. And I guess this is his version of saving face. It doesn't make sense. The guy's going to go down fighting to the very end. I can't believe that we're still here a month later. And so that tells me this is going to be like this till January 20th.
Brandon, do you have any insights or any guesses into what Trump's end game is and why he's ending his presidency this way?
Yeah, and I think Jason nailed it. I think that he has to delegitimize the entire election to keep, because he can't lose. You have to remember that despite his many, and there are many business failures, that he refuses to ever admit defeat, refuses to ever admit that he has made a mistake or has lost anything. And so he telegraphed months ago that he would not lose, that he could not lose. And in fact, that if he was not reelected, it would be due to fraud because he will not accept anything otherwise. And as Jason mentioned, that gives him the ability to continue to raise money off of this. And so that is critical because he has all these debts to pay. And if you look at the portion of these dollars that are being raised, many of them go directly to Trump, and they do not go to the court challenges themselves. So it's a way for him to raise money, be able to pay off these legal debts that are coming due. And keep himself out there front and center among his supporters. I think he's also very cautious about not losing the support he has and just kind of, fading away into the background. He can't afford to do that if he wants to project influence over Republican Party politics going forward. And so he's also looking at how he's best able to do that, because I think all of these avenues point to how he's able to make money and what his next move is for money. And so, money comes from relevance, it comes from influence, and it comes from media attention. And so he is doing whatever he can to continue to get that.
And that's proving to be very successful, right? I mean,
completely. That's what his success is built on. And I think that if the media is smart and capable, they will stop covering him and giving him attention after Inauguration Day. As soon as he exits the White House, his media coverage should just go into free fall. But he is going to do everything possible to keep up the crazy, which will continue to give him attention and publicity. And so that's what it comes down to for him. He doesn't care if he delegitimizes the election and causes, half of America to doubt the institutions that we rely on to run elections. Because with him, it's all about his next move and how he's able to move forward.
Well, and when I say successful too, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'd read that the emails that he sends out to his subscriber list over the last couple of weeks is raising as much money as he was in the final weeks of the campaign. And the primary message sent in these campaign emails is to say, help me fight the election, help fight the rigged results. And it's microprint at the bottom that says where the money actually goes, which can pay off debt and can be used in the future, which obviously this is misleading and probably obviously also not surprising, but distressing because nobody calls him out on it to the base and to the very people who are giving up their money for that.
Right. And what is the irony of this, guys, is who is hurting most from this? I mean, who's becoming a casualty of this effort to delegitimize the process just to, inflate his ego and improve his profit potential at post-election, post-office. It's the Republicans that are running in Georgia, right? Because they now face the prospect of having a decline in turnout and this massive distrust in the system by Trump supporters. And Trump himself doesn't seem to care about that at all and the results and what that means. And you now have Trump acolytes that are out there, people like Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood, who are saying boycott the election, don't vote in January because it's rigged and you can't trust it.
Well, and then to the point of Georgia, even his previous supporters, which he backed, Brian Kemp and the Secretary of State, he's bullying them now just because they're certifying the election results, and just the barest of standing up to him is potentially ruinous to their own political career. So I would think that would be a lesson to other folks who are still standing behind him through this.
It should be, right? Because no amount of loyalty is enough for Trump. If you're not 100% loyal, you are dispensable. And he will easily dispense with you at a moment's notice. And so that should be the writing on the wall for these Republicans who think very naively that they can somehow walk this line and just do enough to not piss him off and somehow manage to go by unscathed. That is not going to work. Even those that have entertained his delusions, many of them face primaries from rabid Trump sycophants, people like Marco Rubio, who Matt Gaetz is already talking about primarying him and being more pro-Trump. And that is going to play out across the country in primaries in 2022.
The other dark side of this is the first days after the election and even the first couple of weeks after the election. I know there was a lot of expressed nervousness over violence or folks not accepting the results, that kind of thing. And it seemed like that was pretty smooth and calm. But now we get stories from the folks who are working at the polls in Georgia, with impassioned pleas to condemn the threats of violence that are towards poll workers and people counting ballots. It was Gabriel Sterling who asked Trump specifically in a press conference to stand up and say something, which he has not. So I had
and
not
Sterling
been,
is a Republican, a fellow Republican, who's saying, basically demanding that Trump, say something to stop the threat, the real threat of violence and death threats that these officials are receiving.
and that's scary because this is in Georgia. And if that election isn't until January, what happens afterwards if it's not to the results that they want? That's possibly only getting worse.
Well, and how ironic is this, right? It's going to become, it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So Trump supporters see the process as rigged. They're going to boycott it and not vote. Both Democrats could win, and then they're going to use that as an example of a rigged election. It comes full circle. And yeah, there is no way that we come out of this with any change. I mean, the problem is this has created long-lasting damage, and it started before Election Day, but was compounded with Trump's speech on election night that he gave, where that cemented the fact in his supporters' minds that this was a rigged process, and no amount of evidence was ever going to change that. And whether it's the courts dismissing these suits completely, whether it's the lack of the direct statements by Trump's lawyers saying that we're not even claiming that there's fraud, like none of that matters because Trump has already set the bar and the tone for what his supporters believe. And we are going to face this for the next 4 years, where you have almost half the country who thinks that this was a rigged election.
Doesn't it make you impressed by the folks involved on both sides back in 2000 of the 300 whatever votes, how close that was, razor thin in Florida? And it was all, I mean, at the time, I'm sure there was lots of noise in the media, but in the historical lens, it looks to have been very professional and calm and handled in a smooth democratic process.
Right. Well, and the thing was, if you go harken back to 2000, the fights that occurred over that about, counting these ballots or that, nobody was casting doubt on the integrity of the system itself. Neither side went out there and said that the system is rigged, that you can't trust the system, that your votes don't count. It was all technocratic.
Hanging chads,
yes,
not
over,
yeah.
and you had Al Gore concede, and so that's a difference from today. Is that it was much closer. The closest vote outcome that we're talking about here is Georgia, which is 12,000 some votes. It's nowhere near the realm of Florida. And in 2000, you had one state with a couple hundred vote difference, and you have multiple states that Biden won by tens of thousands of votes to 154,000 votes. Like it's not close. It just isn't.
Is there so Trump's campaigning locally, Craig? You mentioned that, and I think President Obama and Stacey Abrams are also having some sort of a rally speech thing. Is there precedent that would suggest that Biden himself shouldn't go down there and do that as president-elect?
I can't think of any precedent off the top of my head, but that would be very poor form.
The campaigning should stop. Yeah.
And I think if he wants to maintain the high ground, which he has right now, I think he stays out of that election. Just real quickly, Jason, you mentioned Trump's fundraising off of this. I saw today that since the election, he has raised $207 million.
Wow.
And this is some weird combination of some of that goes to pay off his existing campaign debts. Some of it goes to his legal defense. But there is no doubt that the Trump team has jumped all over this as a fundraising possibility. And the other thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is who gets hurt during this process. The one thing we know for sure, Trump is going to walk away from this kind of scot-free. Trump is never going to feel the weight of what he did, and there's not going to be a consequence on level for what he's done. So if we immediately say Trump's not ever going to be hurt by his actions, by what he's doing right now, who are the people, the institutions? I guess, Jason, talk about who are the practical, who does get hurt during this whole thing?
Well, it's not anybody.
Government takes it, but in real terms, who's damaged by what Trump's doing right now?
It's not going to be anybody in his inner circle, right? We've already heard rumors this week about the preemptive pardons for his family. It's just unbelievable. So I don't think you're going to see anybody be accountable in his inner circle, certainly. the people who get hurt by this the most are those who either want to run for office in 2024 off of a legitimate platform, the overall electoral system and how we vote, our democracy, and frankly, the people who could stand the most from a smooth transfer of power and a compromised, a set of leaders who are willing to compromise, pass legislation that supports them in the time of crisis, and paints a great picture for leading us forward in 2021. That's not happening right now. You're only going to hear one side each time trying to be louder than the other. There's going to be fights over who serves, fights over who gets in a cabinet position to help set that direction, and it's just the chaos will continue. And so it's the American citizen that gets hurt from this. And we're our own worst enemy there by enabling this.
Yeah, I agree. Brandon, do you have thoughts on who you talk about inside the government? What groups, what institutions, who is being the most damaged right now from a government perspective by Trump's behavior?
Right. Well, outside the electoral process, I think the most obvious is the Department of Justice and federal law enforcement, because of the way this administration has politicized the DOJ, gone after its opponents, has attempted to use the DOJ to intervene in Trump's personal lawsuits and in civil suits against him, the sexual harassment and assault lawsuits. The way that Bill Barr has used the Justice Department, I think that has really eroded support for them as a non-political entity. So that's been extremely damaging. It's hard once you get into other agencies, facets of government. The next obvious one is the CDC, because of how they were politicized by Trump and they were told to stand down. And, there were all those examples of memos they wanted to issue and guidelines to the states that were withheld because of Trump intervening. That was unprecedented. The CDC has always been an independent entity. It's very rare, if unheard of, until this year for the president to intervene with what the CDC says in their guidelines. So public health suffered as a consequence, and I think that it'll take a while for the CDC to recover from that, and Health and Human Services. And then you have this exodus that has taken place over the last 4 years across all agencies in government of career civil servants who fled because being demoralized with not being able to do their jobs. And so you have these ranks that need to be filled, and all of these vacancies. And so that's going to be a massive challenge for Biden, is just getting the levers of government working again, because all of these agencies are operating, at 50% capacity, some less, some with acting agency heads because there's no permanent head. It's that aspect is also something we've never been seeing, and I don't think it can be overstated just how significant that is. And the Biden administration, incoming administration, is going to have its work cut out for them, bringing these civil servants back, filling these roles, just making these agencies work again, because they're not. I mean, and there's anecdotal stories, that I could tell you, even with the Small Business Association. I know businesses that have applied for loans and their loans have been put on hold and they haven't heard anything back for months. And when they finally do get through, the excuse given is staffing shortages. We don't have the head that needs to be able to give approval, the agency head. And there's plenty of examples like that, but that's the most significant.
Well, and as long as Trump continues to suck all the oxygen out of the room, doesn't that block the next generation of leadership from getting out in front and having a voice and starting to make their own path for the future? I mean, who can ever outshine this guy right now? And I think that hurts Republicans in 2024 and going forward. There is no room for anybody else to step up and be a leader.
No, we did talk about how the end of the Trump era would hopefully signal a fight for the heart and soul of the Republican Party. But that really can't happen now. If Trump is still a factor, he is still teasing a 2024 run. There isn't a chance for the party to be taken back, and for there to be that internal implosion that needs to happen and a reset as long as Trump is still a factor. You can't get there unless the Trump era is extinguished and Trump is no longer a part of the party. And he clearly is and clearly wants to be involved and continue his legacy. So if that's the case, there is no reset of the party. We're just a continuation of what we've seen the last 4 years. And it means that the party becomes further behind in trying to recover their losses in the suburbs and urban areas. They've mostly, for the most part, become a rural party. And, that has worked for them so far. But again, there is limitation to how many rural voters they can turn out. And we saw that happen, right? Trump was able to expand his base beyond our imaginations. But even doing that and getting every vote he could out of the rural areas, it wasn't enough in those states he needed to win, because Biden winning the suburbs and the urban vote, and with the population bases there, it outweighed Trump's performance in rural areas. So it's not a winning message. And if states like Arizona and Georgia continue to change demographically with their urban areas becoming more blue, Republicans can't afford to continue down the Trump route. And Trump forces them to hoe to that line and that appeal to rural voters at the expense of the rest of the country.
So Brandon, are Republicans, with their silence, are they endorsing 8 more years of Trump? Because Trump is going to announce he's running again, and he is going to maintain, or he's going to attempt to maintain, this absolute stranglehold he has on the Republican Party. If you're a Republican senator or governor that is sitting on their hands during this whole episode, is what they're really saying is they endorse, they're signing up for 8 more years of Trump being the public face and the ideological face of the Republican Party? Is that what they're doing? Because that's what they're signing off on.
Tacitly, yes. I mean, again, it's this posture of, unwilling to come out publicly and to rock the boat, and the thinking that somehow they can ride this out and stay safe, when we know that's not a possibility, because any attempt to deviate from 100% loyalty to Trump, you get called out. And even if you've been on your best behavior, like, Marco Rubio, you get primary. There is no upside to trying to strike a balance when it comes to appeasing Trump. They're trying to do that anyway. Now, the irony is, if they would step back and actually look at what the results of the election told us, more Americans dislike Trump than they did Republicans running for the House and Senate. Republicans running for the House and Senate outperformed Trump in many of these states, which tells you that Trump is a loser, and a loser of extreme magnitude, because his party actually fared much better despite having him at the top of the ballot. There were enough people who said, I don't like Trump, and I'm not going to vote for him, but I am going to vote for my Republican member of Congress, my Republican senator. And so that should be enough to tell them, hey, there's a separation here, that we can run on our own accord. We don't have to tie ourselves to Trump to be able to win. But again, I think a lot of it is psychological, and Trump has been very effective at keeping them in line.
There's one other president who ran after losing one and served a second term as a split.
Grover Cleveland.
Grover Cleveland. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not without precedent.
It's happened one other time in history. Yep. So it could happen again.
What you just described, Brandon, is what's just so amazing, in that the message that the Republicans should be taking from this election is their down ticket wins. That they were able to not only hold on, but expand their legislative power in an election that the Republican president was historically and soundly defeated. And instead of reveling in that victory and talking about what that victory means to the future of the party, all they're doing is getting sucked into this vortex that Trump has led them in with no way out. Jason, you help me understand. The phrase is always, if you take a shot at the king, you better kill him. Well, Trump's gone. He lost. Battleground states have already certified the election. What's left?
It's a great question, Craig. What's left? I don't know. I have to think that a lot of this is still fear, right? People don't want to speak up either because they fear Trump, because they fear fundraising, because they fear that there's enough of a populace still behind him and his style of politics that they don't want to be the one out front. They don't. If the whole line moves back, they don't want to be one step ahead. You almost need like a backroom deal amongst 5 leading Republicans to say, you know what, we're all going to come out together and we're going to, again, stand shoulder to shoulder and say, okay, we want to focus on the future of the Republican Party. Who is going to be our next leader? And we want to talk about the great and meaningful issues we have to discuss and convince America to change on it. And it's not happening. I don't see it happening anytime soon. I can't believe it. I thought this call today, we would have been discussing how somebody stepped up there. I can't wait to find out how this plays out because I can't predict it. It is unpredictable.
So if Tiger King was the early pandemic media sensation, remember Tiger King?
Yes.
I was going to say, and don't tell me you two didn't watch it.
I did.
I didn't watch it, but I got the blow by blow from my wife. She and I'm sure many others watched it.
Or are you going to watch the movie where Nicolas Cage plays the Tiger King?
I'd probably see anything Nicolas Cage is in. That sounds entertaining.
It does. So if Tiger King was the media sensation of the front of the pandemic, Rudy Giuliani and his cast of whatever married lawyer men or whomever, they are definitely the media darling of the last half or the ending act of the pandemic. So their tactic is they're going and doing these kind of informal or non-sworn presentations to state legislators. Have you guys watched any of this stuff and how corrosive this stuff is? These people, they're bringing people out that have filled out online affidavits that are reporting suspicious things that they saw. The highlight in Michigan yesterday was where one woman said, well, of course you should use photo ID because all Asians and blacks look alike. And it's not hyperbole. That is what she said. There was a woman yesterday, the blonde woman, her name just flew out of my mind. She was hammered drunk. She was obviously impaired. It was an SNL skit. The Michigan legislators came out and said that was a colossal waste of time. There was no evidence shown during that procedure. What stops these things? Do we just have to ride this out? Is this part of what you're saying, Jason? And with nobody stepping up, can we just expect this to go on all the way up to the 20th? I guess I'm looking for the exit ramp. Where is one going to open?
Somebody has to have enough spine to stand up and take the microphone and lead. And you know what? It's actually an opportunity, right? The person with the right voice, with the right charisma, with the right intelligence who can get in front and say, here's all the conservative agenda I believe in that we still have momentum behind, that we can get in front of the legislature in January and pass. Very likely, we'll see how the Georgia race goes, and start talking about what they're going to do next and what they can do with some unification, and just ignore him and ignore all the people that are coming out. It feels like an opportunity for somebody who's willing to be courageous enough and step out and do that. Instead, they all sit silent, and we just watch this train wreck.
Well, and the opportunity was there when Trump indicated that he was going to challenge the results using the certification at the state legislative level, because that was a shot across the bow saying, this is not only ridiculous, it's completely anti-democratic. And the fact that you would even entertain this and put that notion out there, that you would overturn the will of the people by having the state legislatures choose electors, and you're going to play this game where you're going to invite legislators from Michigan and Pennsylvania to the White House to try to coerce them into this, career-killing move. That should have been an opportunity for Republicans on the Hill to come together, a press conference, and say enough is enough. They're going to have another opportunity, apparently, to do this, and this will be when Congress certifies the vote after the states individually send their electors, because there's already been a couple of congressmen, Matt Gaetz, I forget who else, who have indicated that they're going to try to contest this, which means that there's going to be some arguments and they're going to pontificate that there was fraud. So that would be an opportunity from the congressional floor before, a national audience for senior Republican statesmen and stateswomen to say, no, this has to stop. That's
over a month from now, right? So we still have 5-6 weeks of this drama.
I just don't see anything happening, though, on the interim. I don't know. There isn't any indication that there's any coordination to get a group of people together to put a stop to this. And it's sad and embarrassing when you have people on the local level, like we said, the Secretary of State of Georgia, the elections chief there, who are being more forceful because they have to, and they have nobody behind them in the Senate and the House, to give them the cover they need. I don't know. It's so unprecedented.
Craig, I don't think you're getting answers, but this is the state we're in.
I'm with you, Jason. I thought the timeline would be much different than it is right now. I thought we would already have a Trump concession, or more Republicans would have come out, and this would have pivoted more towards a policy discussion around what is possible when Biden takes over the federal government. And we just can't seem to be able to get there. The president yesterday put out a 45-minute video that he made in the White House at a podium behind the seal of the President of the United States, in a speech that he called the most important speech he will make during his time as presidency. He went on a 45-minute batshit lunatic rant, just basically regurgitating every type of conspiracy theory and Rudy Giuliani endorsed Dominion mail-in fraud that's out there.
And that was recorded last week, right? So they recorded it separately, released it even after Attorney General Barr said no widespread fraud existed. So they chose to ignore that and still release this and generate all the drama behind it. 46 minutes.
I've never seen that one. That took me back a little bit. That made me stop and say, this is not over. This isn't going to be over. We should expect this all the way up to inauguration and after. Because that just showed that he's not letting this go. He's not slowing down. In some ways, you could make the argument that he is picking up speed. And through that video, I think you can see he truly believes he was wronged. And I just don't see him hitting the eject button on this.
Well, he has people in his ear telling him he was wronged.
Sure. Jason, what would you think? There's a rumor that Trump is going to have a counter inauguration event, that during Joe Biden's inauguration, he would not attend, there would not be a handoff, and he actually is going to do a rally and kind of announce his candidacy for presidency in 2024 and put together kind of a counter-programming event to the inauguration of the president of the United States.
It would be
Do you think that would happen?
Deeply disturbing for our republic and what it means for the future. I can't even imagine what that would look like for any other country outside, let alone splitting the public. There will be some portion of people who say that that's the right inauguration and they're going to follow that and everything else. What happens then? Does somebody actually have to escort the man out of the White House? It can't get to that. It can't get to that. The folks in the Senate have got to stand up by then.
What evidence do you have, Jason, that's not going to come to that?
A tiny shred of hope.
I desperately but that just sounds like on brand for.
That's on brand and on par. I mean, look at remember when Trump skipped out on the Iowa caucuses, and he instead, held his own counter programming where he raised all that money for veterans and then never gave it to them.
And just real briefly, Brandon, do you remember Ted Cruz won the Iowa caucus? Correct.
Yes.
And what was Trump's reaction to that?
Fraud. It was fraudulent. It was stolen from him. The tweets are out there. Yeah.
The point being is this.
We should have learned this lesson.
This is what he does time and time again. I mean, everybody could have seen this coming.
Let's not forget, Trump's true passion is litigation. If there's one consistency through his entire adult life, it's he's always suing somebody for something. So in some ways, this just falls right into what his MO has been time and time again.
Do you think there has to be some sort of constitutional change or legal adjustment that prevents this kind of thing from happening again?
What would that be?
A formal election board that once the results are certified, that happens in December, that hands over all the transition team duties and public policy decisions that occur between then, announcements to the media. I don't know. But there's obviously just enough vagueness built in right now that allows us to be in this state.
I do like the fact that 50 different states run 50 different elections. And I think we're seeing the strength of that right now. There is no way for the federal government to grab a hold of a presidential election just because you've got 50. It'd be like trying to grab and hold 50 balls at one time. You just can't do it. So I'm kind of leery of anything that consolidates federal election power into the federal government. By the way, the Supreme Court of Wisconsin today shot down Giuliani's lawsuit in Wisconsin. Do you want to know what the vote was? 4-3. Yeah. So another argument here is that the institutions have held, that Trump has not gotten away with this. He's 1-41 in court, but it only takes one. I guess the kind of final maybe question on this topic is, Brandon, do you feel the institutions have held? And to what Jason just said, we're not even halfway through this yet. Can they hold?
I think they will at this point, but I say this, as a caveat. I think that they have only held because, there have been enough individuals willing to uphold them. There are not a lot of checks in place and a lot of barriers to ensure that they were upheld. We saw this with the canvassing boards, right? Like the Wayne County canvassing board. All it took, even though, and the state canvassing board as well in Wisconsin, all it takes is a couple of them to say, oh, nope, I don't have any faith. I'm not going to vote to certify. Well, okay, it's been a norm that, for hundreds of years that the vote to certify is something that's done. You can't really say you're not going to certify the results. But maybe we actually need state laws that say, no, like if you are chosen for this role, this is your duty. You have to certify. You can't vote against certifying results because of your own biases. So we need to firm up some of these boards and agencies that are tasked with formalizing the election results to prevent bad actors from intervening and contradicting the election process, because clearly they can do that if they want. And remember that in Michigan, with the statewide certification, that happened by one vote. So there were two Republicans, there's a split, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. One of the Republicans voted against certifying. So all eyes were on this other Republican. And thankfully he held firm and said, no, there is no other option. This is what we're supposed to do. But if he had been a different person or had been, that could have easily been deadlocked, and it would have been a constitutional crisis in the state of Michigan. And to me, that seems like we're very close. Like we're holding on by a thread. And so far, everything has gone right, but it's barely gone right. It hasn't been rock solid. And I think that's where state laws could provide some buffer.
That was well said, Brandon. I think the piece that I pull out of there too is the word norms. We've relied so much on norms that have been thrown out the window here. I hope that somewhere there are some constitutional scholars evaluating which norms were easily trashed and think, is there some way to substantially empower that to not happen into the future? And I don't know if it's federally or not, but it seems too dangerously close.
There's been a lot of smart people who have said through this whole process that they didn't realize how much of the federal government was a simple gentleman's agreement, that things worked that way because people agreed upon a set of unwritten rules. And that's how a lot of the government runs. Are we going to return to that? Do we need more rules, laws? Do we need more stronger federal election laws? I don't know, but this experience certainly opens that discussion at this point. So while this is happening too, Joe Biden is trying to become the president. He is trying to put a cabinet together. We've talked about this multiple times. The true strength of the presidency is the over 3,000 hires and appointments you need to make into the federal government. That's why we have a transition period. That's why transitions are extremely important. Jason, you'd mentioned that Biden's already kind of catching some flack over some of his cabinet appointments. Where do you think Biden's going with his cabinet? And are we ready to be super progressive, or are we just going back to what feels comfortable?
Well, I think there's definitely a bit of the latter there. There's no question President-elect Biden's a very loyal person, and he's looking to all the folks he's worked with over his long political career. The good side of the coin is you're getting some really experienced adults and people who know how to work in the government in positions surrounding him and helping him. The bad side of this is it's some of the same Clinton era folks that ruffle feathers. And, there was a time when Obama was selecting his cabinet where he went off of this team of rivals concept. And it was mostly his rivals on the left, not on the right. But there's a part of me that wishes Biden were finding ways to find people to put in positions of prominence from not just rivals within the Democratic Party, progressive versus moderates, but even conservatives and Republicans, and get somebody in there, not just to legitimize the election, but also maybe, I don't know, galvanize the base on what they want to do next and bring back compromise into the topic of conversation. It's a heck of an opportunity. And I think if we just see a bunch of Clinton era appointments, it's going to be looked at as the same old, the swamp is refilling kind of message, which isn't going to serve the congressional elections in 2 years well.
Brendan, does the swamp matter? Was the swamp a creation of Trump, and can Biden reposition the swamp as really lifelong bureaucrat public servants who are there because they know what they're doing and the country runs off the swamp? Brandon, you've muted yourself. We're doing this remote. We have our first technical difficulty. Can you hear me, Brandon?
Yep. Okay. So I think that Biden can, as long as he chooses appointees who are squeaky clean, don't have troublesome connections, to lobbyists and lobbying firms. That was the line of attack that was effective for Trump, is going after the cozy relationship between, the White House, Capitol Hill, and lobbyists. And so I think that that is going to be key for Biden. And he has already chosen some appointees who I think are experienced hands, but will also inject some calm into government. His chief of staff, Ron Klain, was his chief of staff back when he was vice president under Obama, but has a long history on Capitol Hill. And so he is somebody who is very appealing. Antony Blinken, who he chose as Secretary of State, was Deputy Secretary of State under President Obama, and has just significant wealth of foreign policy experience. Somebody you would want leading that department with his service and diplomacy. So yes, I think there has to be a balance, though, between bringing in those who are skilled and have that prior experience under Clinton and Obama, and also bringing in some new people who are going to kind of energize the administration and represent that link between the past and the future, and the present and the future, because that is also something I think that Biden has to be very mindful of as far as perception goes, that he is a bridge really between, the old Democratic Party and the new Democratic Party. And so it can't just be Obama and Clinton hands. It also has to be some of the younger, newer people who are rising within the party as well.
Jason, overall, have you been satisfied with his picks? Did you expect a little bit more of a progressive slant to his cabinet?
I did not expect much more of a progressive slant. I think he takes his win against others during the primaries as enough message that he can pick the more moderate and the moderates in the group. That said, we have Harris choosing a cabinet too, and there seems to be another opportunity there to fill people that she finds to be unique and more progressive. So I do think there's plenty of opportunity for these folks to get involved here, but I don't think he's as motivated. My guess is there's a couple of token spots filled to satisfy the far left, but I don't think there was enough of a strong mandate of the progressive side of the party to influence it too strongly yet.
So I think one of the takeaways from the election, or one of the potential takeaways of the election on the right, is that Trump's performance was a complete kind of repudiation of wokeism and political correctness. And it shows that America is tired of intersectional identity politics. There might be something to that. At the same time, Biden has made a big deal about he has an all-female communications team. He's being pushed by Latinos to add more Latinos to his cabinet. Brandon, this is a tricky question, and I haven't even formed in my head how I want to ask this yet, so I'll probably goof this up. But is that playing into that kind of intersectional identity politics that maybe didn't work out for the Democrats as well as they thought it would?
In some aspects, yes. And I think you're going to have conservative Americans who look at that with somewhat jaded perceptions and say, oh, this is an example of affirmative action or choosing people not based on competency, but on race and ethnicity, and trying to, really kind of create forced diversity. But also, you have to be mindful of, from Biden's perspective and the Democrats' perspective, Trump had the most white cabinet in history. And did it go for diversity at all? There were a couple of handpicked people of color in the Trump orbit, but very few, and most of them did not have high-ranking positions. And particularly when it came to women, there were very few women that had high-ranking roles within the Trump administration. So in some ways, I think Biden sees this as a reset to at least have a cabinet that's more representative of the country and the changing demographics of the country, because that's that also instills confidence in the government as well, right? When people look at the people who are in charge and they say, hey, there's somebody who looks like me, who sounds like me, there's geographic diversity as well as demographic diversity. So you don't want that to be a be-all, end-all of your approach to selecting people in your administration, but it probably should be a factor to a degree, because you want people to feel invested and feel like they can trust the government once again. Sure. And I think Biden has done that well in some aspects when it has come with Latinos. I know there's been some griping and some consternation among African Americans who feel like he hasn't yet announced enough African American appointees to be reflective of their support of him. But it's typical, right, that this early on at this stage in the transition, you're going to see the kind of the sniping internally and some of the internal tension as far as who's getting a job, who isn't. It's not abnormal with what you see in any administration.
Well, and he stated up front that he wanted a cabinet that looked like America. So we knew where he was heading there, and Harris is doing the same, right? I think I've heard that her entire cabinet and staff so far are people of color. So there is definitely more diverse voices there now. And hopefully we will wait and see how they do their jobs before we be too judgmental.
Pete Buttigieg not being announced into a cabinet position is a good thing. Pete Buttigieg served as an attack dog for Biden on Fox News the last month of the election. I like the fact that he was not rewarded with a cabinet position because he hasn't earned one. There was talk of him being the secretary to the UN. Why? He's the mayor of a small town in Indiana. He doesn't have the experience yet to do that job. There was talk about him running the VA. The VA is a billions and billions dollar government organization. He is the mayor of a town of 100,000 people. That does not qualify him to run an organization the size of the VA. So I've been kind of thankful and kind of happy. The woman who was his main communications person, she did not become the communications director of the White House. I thought those were some positive signs that he's not doing what Trump did and just take people that were loyal to him and helped him and put them into cabinet positions. Let's end with everybody's favorite topic, COVID. We had some good news last week with the vaccines. I think everybody was very excited about that. And then this week we seemed to snap back to reality. So Jason, we hit our first day, I believe, for the entire pandemic where we had over 3,000 deaths. We had more deaths yesterday than we did at the what seemed to be the height of this pandemic in March in New York City.
That's right.
Have we just forgotten about that? Are we just tired of it? Is it the winter? Is it the holidays? What's causing us to maybe kind of not pay the attention to this it deserves or have a strategy this far into this pandemic?
Well, we've been warned for a couple of weeks that we were about to enter a long, dark winter on this. And I think what we saw yesterday and today are the numbers starting to reflect that, which is pretty scary. I don't know about you guys, but you drive around our community and everybody's still out. Restaurants are still full. Bars are still full. Parking lots are still full. My kids are home from school this week. They're supposed to be 100% virtual. But for the most part, I think people got tired of it. People didn't want to have to lock down. I mean, there still aren't enough people impacted by this for you to see your neighbors get sick or somebody in your family get sick. And therefore it doesn't have that fear element. You're not scared enough to want to change how you operate. And we're months away from most people getting a vaccine. So it's going to get worse. And it's a shame. I've been really interested to see how the school piece plays out. I don't know if you guys realize that elementary school kids are still back full time for most of the school districts around here. It's the high school and middle schools who have been hybrid or now completely virtual. As a parent of people in both, I never quite understood why an elementary school child can be in full time and be expected to not touch one another or cough one another or breathe too much in the same space, but a middle school or high school student couldn't. And I've recently started to hear that perhaps some of that is due to the number of teachers who can stay in the classes, the number of teachers who've been out sick, the fact that there aren't enough subs, and the fact that it's easier in theory to ask a middle school or high school kid to learn from home and to pay attention over a Zoom call. Although if you've ever seen a 12-year-old boy try to spend 8 hours of his day in front of a Zoom call, it's not a very productive one. And I think it's a shame that our community can't find a way to prioritize kids being in school over filling up restaurants, bars, and gyms. I think our priorities are whack. I'm biased because I have kids, but I think we see this now being reflected in the numbers. We prioritize athletics and food over kids being in school, and you see that by people going about their business. What that means economically, what that means for small businesses and other places is not just workers. Workers have to stay home because they're sick and attendance drops. What happens to the industry that's both local and national? I mean, if there's this many deaths and it keeps going up, that's all going to get worse, and the economic impact is going to be devastating.
Maybe we'll ask it this way, because we talked about the vaccines. Everybody's excited about the vaccine. The UK went ahead and approved the Pfizer vaccine. Europe has far less regulations than we do with the FDA. We're assuming that the FDA is going to approve this on the 10th. So maybe we start this way. Jason, would you put your kids in line to get the vaccine so they could, with the goal being everybody, if we get 75% or 80% of the kids in your school district vaccinated, everybody can go back to school full time?
I do trust the FDA, and I actually appreciate the fact that despite all the pressure now coming even this week from Britain having passed it, we have our process. We're going to go through it. We know it works. It feels slow at a time like this, and I do actually appreciate the debate too. If you allow it to go out early, do you prevent some of these 3,000 deaths every day? But for me personally, to feel comfortable putting my kids in there, yes, I want the FDA to do their piece, even if it takes a little bit longer. And then yes, all four of our family will be in line to get that.
Brandon, should we mandate this? And if it is going to be mandated, would it be better to be mandated by the federal government or by your employer?
I would say not by the federal government. I think if there's at a time when trust is at an all-time low in the federal government, I mean, you're only going to exacerbate the lack of trust, the conspiratorial mindset if you mandate via the feds the vaccinations. There's a carrot and a stick approach, and the carrot approach probably works best. I would say that employers incentivizing their employees to be able to get this vaccine, whether it be by bonuses or additional PTO or what have you, is going to be most effective. I think that I cannot see the federal government going through with any type of mandate. But I could see private, not just employers, but also private companies. Qantas Airlines, the Australian airline, announced that they were going to mandate the coronavirus vaccine to be able to fly on their aircraft. So I would be surprised if you saw other entities like that mandate, cruise ships mandate having had the vaccine before you can become a passenger.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's certain things that there's certain instances where you have to get a vaccine. For example, and Jason, you've got school-age kids. I don't, but I'm pretty sure you can't send your kids to school without vaccinations.
That's right.
So there is some precedence for this. What would you feel like would happen maybe at your employer if the email came out that said, great news, everybody, we reached out to Pfizer, we've secured, vaccine for everybody. So starting Monday, wear a short sleeve shirt because you're all getting it. What do you think would happen if that email came out?
It would be pandemonium. There is no way that goes down without a fight. And I understand it. I don't think you can mandate it. It does feel like a violation of personal rights. I think you have to have a mixture of science and art convincing people how important this is. And Craig, I think it was you that told us there's already been news about a series of ex-presidents willing to show getting it. That's fascinating. It's kind of depressing that that's what it might take, but if that works, that's great. We need to show people that it's safe and effective, and maybe there'll be outliers who want to wait 3 months or something until the rest of us got in line, got our shot, and lived and survived it. But I think the motivation to return to normal life is pretty darn strong. And I think that is hopefully enough of a carrot to get it started.
I hope so as well. I'm very encouraged by, former President Clinton, Obama, and Bush coming out and doing this. And I think that that's leading by example. And that's when the ex-president's club does something, it carries weight, especially when they act in unison. But I think you're going to need a very strong PSA campaign around this as well, especially because we're also living in times, you have to put this in context of the anti-vaxxer movement being gaining strength and being the largest that it's been in years, which is why prior to this pandemic, we had this resurgence of like measles and mumps and some of these other diseases that we hadn't seen outbreaks in a long time. We're starting to see outbreaks again because of anti-vaxxers and people not vaccinating their children. So we're seeing some of these other diseases come back. So you really are going to need a strong PSA campaign behind this vaccine, also because it's the quickest it has gone to market. And that doesn't mean that it's dangerous, but that does increase the likelihood that bad actors are going to cast doubt on it and make claims that don't have any basis. And so I would like to see a cross section of celebrities, pro athletes, artists get together and get the vaccine and record spots for it, put things on social media. There needs to be I think a coordinated effort to show America that this is basically something akin to the Victory Garden effort in World War II. It's about bringing our country together. It's about looking out for the common good. And it's not enough for just some people to get this. We really have to do this en masse to reach herd immunity. And so we're talking about 60% plus of the population to get there. And that, this is a way that you can be patriotic and support your fellow citizens.
And shouldn't it be celebrated that it was U.S. scientific brain power that saw this? Like we should be proud of that, and I would think that would be an influence and have some national pride towards that.
Isn't this American exceptionalism? Isn't this what American exceptionalism is all about? We were the ones who invented, who got to this vaccine the first. We should be the ones that achieve herd immunity first. You can't see this, but I have a piece of paper in front of me, and I literally drew a straight line between doubting the election results and not getting the vaccine. Those two have to be related now, don't they? And maybe this is Trump's biggest sin as he goes out, as he leaves, at a time when we needed trust in government at its highest to get this vaccine out and to get this pandemic behind us. It's at an all-time low. And the person with his foot on its neck, stomping it as low as he can get, is the president of the United States.
And it's literally allowing deaths, more deaths than necessary.
Yeah. All right. So, Jason, usually after an hour, we try to end on more of a lighter note of just, things we're consuming in the culture, streaming things we're into, TV shows we're watching. Do you, let's start with this, just to introduce you to the audience for this topic. How many streaming services do you currently subscribe to?
Too many. Still collectively cheaper than the old cable bill, but
True.
Yeah. Netflix, Amazon. I think I'm getting Apple for free right now.
Okay.
Those three.
Is there anything exceptional off that you're watching? Books you're reading, those count too?
I've liked everything that actually came on the Apple news or the Apple TV service, which is hard to argue against free. And I know that some people are, have Google and they don't have iOS or whatever, but they're producing some really great stuff on there. There's a Tom Hanks movie on there that's good. There's that Jason Sudeikis show is really good. Let's see. The one thing that I have to bring up on this I have one more service because this is my point for you too, Craig. Disney Plus has a show called Long Way Up, which is Ewan McGregor and his best friend get on motorcycles and ride from the very southern tip of South America to LA.
I think there's commercials for that. That'd be cool.
Yeah. We've been watching it as a family. We've only seen a couple episodes so far. They're on electric bikes, which is part of the shtick too. And so the first couple episodes are a lot of, we're in rough weather and we got to recharge and we can't find a charge. So blah blah blah. But along the way, they're going to be seeing a lot of different cultures of the countries that they're visiting and the people around there and the different foods and see a lot of the just amazing landscape that they're on through there. And when we started watching that, I thought of you because I know that you've taken a few trips yourself. So I recommend that Long Way Up on Disney Plus, whatever it's called.
I think, Brandon, you and I have had the Star Wars, Star Trek argument, I think like a dozen times, but I want to give a plug to CBS All Access. If you're not watching the new Star Trek Discovery series, you are truly missing one of the best sci-fi series to ever come along. CBS bought the Star Trek franchise, I think 3 or 4 years ago, And when they launched CBS All Access, between Star Trek Discovery, they had a Picard series, if you're the Next Generation fan, those two series, absolutely phenomenal, and just cements that Star Trek is just so far ahead of Star Wars in the sci-fi space genre that you just shouldn't even watch any of that trash.
Not even close. Oh, come on.
Straight to Star Trek. It's not even. Brandon, I agree with you. It's not even close.
What? So this gives me the opportunity to plug The Mandalorian on Disney Plus for anybody who hasn't seen that, because that is one of
that kicked off
season 2. Yep.
Okay. I tried to watch that today. You know why I couldn't? Because my wife doesn't remember what email address and password she signed up to do. So it'll take another 2 weeks to figure that out.
But as much as Star Wars is criticized for recycling plot devices and not being original, The Mandalorian is completely original. There's nothing recycled about it. It's captivating. It keeps your attention. It's a great series. Well done.
Brandon, how could you say that? It's based on Yoda. It's another recycle of another character. 2 characters. The Mandalorian is a recycle.
It's the same creature as Yoda. It's not Yoda. I mean, it's the same species, and it's a completely different set of characters overall. And so it's and different adventures, different things happening, and it takes place, in a time period between the films that we know. So it's completely original.
I'm not going about that. Jason, do you have a Star Wars, Star Trek hot take to end the podcast, or are you staying out of this one?
Well, I'm definitely interested to see all these CBS shows. I just don't want to subscribe to another
That's
service.
How I feel too. I've heard of a lot of good shows on CBS, but it's like, it's another one to add to the mix.
It's another $9 a month that, 2 years when you haven't watched it. You're like, what the hell is this? It's one of those things you sign up for that when you do an audit of all your services, like once every 3 years, you probably get rid of because you haven't used it at all.
Well, and then you have Netflix is raising their prices. I'm sure you guys saw that announcement. They're
missed
increasing,
that one.
Yeah, to $13.99 a month now.
Wow. My son wants us to get Hulu because it's got all kinds of anime or something on it. So too many already.
He needs to get Crackle. There's an all anime service that,
Oh, geez. I don't even want him to know that
Crackle
exists.
is free. There's not a cost to Crackle.
My son had some anime members. Some anime subscription or something, because there's some anime show that they've made like 25 seasons of or something. I'm out of my league.
That's every anime show.
Yeah. I never got into anime, so I'm at a loss there.
I don't understand anime. All right. That's our hour. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to 2 Men in the Middle. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website at 2meninthemiddle.com. Drop us an email at 2meninthemiddle@gmail.com or tweet at us at 2 Men in the Middle. We'll see you next week.